Well, my general sense would be here that this is probably not going to be something huge, or a huge session, so maybe we can just kind of gather around here and talk with one another. Yeah, that would be great. Especially since there is going to be some interaction. Yeah, I know that guy too. Good to see you, Florian. Good to see you. Good to see you. I think I typically offer quarter. We have still 2 minutes, right? Ask me things. 1 minute says this. Okay. So you admit people when they come in? Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thanks. I know this lady. Okay. Wonderful. We are complete.
Yeah, from cheering one to sitting at the other.
I know.
Excellent.
I know. I did the exact same thing. I also chaired another session before this. Okay. That's how it is. Let's give people another minute to arrive. I guess you're not the only one running.
Wow, that was great.
Yeah. You hear us all right, Ting? Wonderful. Very good. We already did. We already asked around, and it's okay.
Hello, Ting. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Sorry, I didn't make it too.
Oh, I can't hear you really, but
Can you hear me?
now yes. Now yes, I think. Yeah. Yeah,
There's an
great.
echo there, yeah.
Looking forward.
All right, let's get started. We are complete. We have an audience. We have Dingo on the Zoom, and everything seems to work, which is wonderful and kind of unexpected. My name is Christian Baden. My only role here is to announce people. Other than that, try and make sure that the session works smoothly. But what is really important is the session, which is entitled Discourse Architectures for Platforms Shape Voices Beyond the West, which has been organized by Anna Litvinenko. Thanks a lot for that. We are going to have five speakers. I can't count. I'm just stupid for that. Five speakers, and the first speaker is going to be Ting Guo from Manchester Metropolitan University. Ting is joining us remotely, and I hope that you are prepared to start. The idea is that we have short inputs from everybody and then get into a conversation. Thanks a lot. Take it away, Ting.
So should I start now?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Right, so thank you very much for inviting me, and also thank you very much for being accommodating, and I can't be there in Paris. So I should start by briefly introducing myself. I'm Ting Luo from Manchester Metropolitan University in the UK. So in this short presentation, I'm going to briefly discuss how platforms shape online discourse in authoritarian times. I hope everything is okay there, the sound.
This is just my speaker. Hang on, just for a second. We need to kind of try and find a way to up the volume a little bit for the speaker here. I can.
Actually, here on
Yeah.
it should be maybe
Turn this round.
this round, so maybe it's like better.
Yeah, try this also.
Can you say something?
Yes, now that's okay?
Is this better? Can you hear us?
Better?
Also, like, you know, if you kind of don't hear that well, you are very welcome to come closer. There is a tiny bit of space still in the room.
Sorry, yeah.
All right, I'm getting out of the picture and giving the picture back to you, Ting. Take it
Okay.
away.
So now it's okay, right? Everything. You hear okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm start to talk about my my previous experimental survey research with my co-author, which compared the technological design of Weibo and WeChat in China. So in that experimental survey research, we find two key messages. The first one is that technological design of the platforms actually shape online discussion in China's cyberspace. So more specifically, platform like Weibo, for example, aiming to make user a source of information through public information-centered communication are actually more conducive to political expression, while platform built to optimize building social connection through private user-centered communication, such as WeChat, actually tend to inhibit political expression. And behind this technological design feature are actually the platform's commercial logic, i.e. they try to optimize a core function in order to make users stick to the platform. And the second message is this platform in fact has a limit. It has to be within the political boundaries set by the state. So simply put, Weibo are more conducive to political expression only when the expression or discussion is not politically sensitive. So I'm aware that the definition of political sensitivity is another complexity we must deal with, but given this is a short presentation, I'm not going to go into detail. Right, so then more recently, I start to move on to study more closely online discussion on Weibo. So in this new project, we focus on one active subcultural group in China's cyberspace, idol fans. And we study how they discuss or engage with politics on Weibo. So we define idol fandom as fandom groups for popular culture idols who enjoy large fan base in youth and attract a high volume of social buzz and digital traffic in mainland China. So for example, K-pop idol, traffic stars, or popular entertainment celebrity, that's what we mean by these idols. And we actually focus on the period that COVID-19 pandemic outbreak from December 2019 to December 2020. So when the pandemic emerged, spread, and was controlled in China. Now, we made use of publicly available Weibo dataset containing COVID-19 related posts collected retrospectively by other scholars, and they make it available online. And in this dataset, we further identify about 7 million Weibo posts that directly mention the name of top influential idol. So this is our sample. Now, why we focus on these posts directly mention those idols' name? Because this is part of the commercial logic of idol fan activity on Weibo. Now, existing study on idol culture in Asia, for example, Korea, Japan, has already demonstrated that idol fandom group use activity, such as subway advertisement, music streaming, crowdfunding to promote and support their idols. And in this regard, Chinese fandom group are not much different from their counterparts in other Asian countries. And on Weibo, one way to promote their idol is to directly mention the idol when posting, and which can help to actually create more traffic associated with that idol and thus popularity for their idols. Now, this is the commercial logic. And I also want to highlight that Weibo's platform design also reinforces this commercial logic. Weibo start to introduce...
Yeah, we just lost sound when you said you can, in Weibo, you can directly mention the idol.
Yeah.
Can you, somehow, like, internet connection is quite bad.
Okay, yeah.
Can you say something?
Yes, how about now?
Okay, you're back.
Now you're back. Now you're back.
Okay, perfect. So as I'm talking about Weibo mentioned the idol names, right?
Yeah, right.
Right, so I just want to highlight why we choose these posts when Weibo idol fans directly mention their idol, because this is the way for them to attract more traffic associated with their idol and thus basically boost popularity for the idols. Now, this is the commercial logic. And Weibo's platform design also reinforced this commercial logic. Now, Weibo started to introduce what we call the idol ranking list in 2014, and also the super topic community, which allow idol fans to build fandom community and organize this public facing activity on Weibo. And an idol's ranking in the list is to a large extent determined by how active he or her super topic community is in terms of engagement and how many posts mentioning his or her name. So now this feature has already been mooted last year. Now there's a complex story behind that, but luckily we were able to collect data before and after this function will be released, will basically be moved by the authority. And maybe our future project will be able to understand or try to investigate how this design change affect idol fandom activity. But this is not the main point of today's presentation. Now, back to the main topic. So we examine closely these fandom posts and spot the political logic, which actually go beyond or further than the political sensitivity boundary in my previous experimental research. Now, first, we found that idol fan groups actually echo, remember that this data set was those posts posted during COVID-19 pandemic, and that discussion has to be related to COVID-19 pandemic, right? And we found that idol fan groups actually echo the key temporal social event in their posts directly with referencing their idol. So for example, they were posts talking about Wuhan lockdown, but they highlight encouraging messages such as, fight to win, we are together, don't give up. And some talk about the frontline workers, such as health staff, police, etc., and trying to pay tribute to these people and appreciation of their hard work. And some other discuss charitable work and donation, i.e., how can they contribute to the pandemic by donating money or resources and promote collective solidarity. And some others also talk about how great China is and how we should obey the restriction set by the state and follow government's guidance. So all this discussion basically coincide with key temporal event, especially state-directed solidarity campaign or state announcement of key pandemic policy. Now, so then we go beyond to sort of the final part of this presentation, then we go beyond to investigate why would they engage in such political expression when they promote their idols. And we conduct a few interviews with idol fans and unravel the political logic behind this activity. So basically, idol fans are aware that their idol need a recognition from the state in order to survive and thrive in this lane. And the recognition from the state is something further than just not talking about political sensitive topics. They need to see the recognition from the state. They need to portray an image of their idol respecting and obeying the rules set by the state, including but not limited to a bigger one like accepting the one China principle, and a smaller one like obeying the COVID restrictions set by the state. Now, they also need to portray an image of their idol being patriotic, i.e. love the country. And finally, their idol need to appear as a role model for others to follow and should promote positive vibe. Now, especially during a hard time like the pandemic. Now, promoting positive vibe, or what we call positive energy, is a term more like the official culture promoted by Xi Jinping since he took office in 20, roughly before, around when he took office in 2012. Now, it basically means that we should promote an attitude that is encouraging and uplifting. So a real-life example would be during Wuhan lockdown, we should promote collective solidarity and look at the bright side. And we should refrain from talking about problems or challenge Wuhan face, which is likely to be considered as negative energy. So this is basically, because this is an ongoing project, so we're still working on it. Now to summarize, so what I try to say today is online discourse in an authoritarian regime is shaped by the platform's commercial logic and the state's political logic. And I must highlight that these two logics are closely connected. Idol need to build their reputation and brand name, and idol company need this idol to generate revenue. And this is the commercial logic. But because they are operating in China, they need to seek recognition from the state to appear as a role model and to be patriotic and to obey rules set by the state in order to attract more traffic and attention. That's more business, and this is the political logic. And internet user, at least the idol fan groups, they do internalize this logic in their online expression. Yeah, that's everything about my presentation. Thank you very much.
Many thanks.
This meeting is being recorded.
Broadly related to the consumption of political information and political news, which is my area of research, we had two platforms. So for instance, we had a web search engine, Yandex, and we had a web search engine, Google. And one of these entities typically was affiliated or owned or controlled by Russia's ruling elites, which I refer to as the Kremlin, basically. And the other platform was owned by a US tech private company. And you had the Yandex News, you had Google News, search engine, the search engine realm, you had the social network for general purposes, Kentucky and Facebook as its counterpart. You had a video sharing platform, YouTube and YouTube, the Russian video sharing platform. You had some portals for finding classmates and classmates in Russia. Social networks focusing on short texts, and as a social network is focusing on image sharing and on the sharing of short video clips. And we can, of course, discuss about the audiences of these platforms in detail, but I think this was the basic picture. But now a timely question, I think, is how will this picture look after Russia's invasion of Ukraine? And I guess what we will see is a kind of what might be called a dehybridization of Russia's platform ecology, because what we already see is that Instagram and Facebook have been declared extremist organizations. That is, in theory, everyone having a Facebook account in Russia could be prosecuted at the moment. And Twitter and Telegram, Twitter has been banned, Telegram not, and then Google News has been banned. What is still online is Google and YouTube. And most observers say that YouTube is still online because YouTube doesn't have the server capacities to provide video sharing services to the Russian population. So most likely what we see is that also YouTube and Google will be banned. Somewhat paradoxically, for instance, YouTube, the state-controlled channels have been banned from YouTube in Russia. But YouTube has been not banned by the Russian government, but the state-controlled channels are still have been. But on Facebook, the state-controlled channels are still available, but Facebook has been banned as an extremist organization. So it's a kind of paradox. But I think it has to do something with the degree to which some services can be substituted and others can be not. The Yandex is currently being split between the external company and the domestic company. So they're trying to sell off the politically relevant sources to a foreign company, because in essence what is at stake, I think it's their business model, because I think at least outside Russia, if users have an alternative, they won't go to a platform whose algorithm is controlled by the Kremlin. So I think it's essential for Yandex to split at the moment. Another interesting question is, this is the picture, a broad picture inside Russia. But if you look now to the post-Soviet region, there are 12 countries where you could see a similar picture before the war, and where, in essence, these platforms have not been banned. The Western platforms have not been banned. They are still accessible. And so I think it's also a big question for empirical research, how this then affects patterns of media consumption in these post-Soviet countries, when people know, we have the choice between a platform that is controlled by the Kremlin and a platform that is controlled by a US tech company. And what we also see in Ukraine, for instance, that Ukraine has banned some of the Russian platforms. So they already in 2017, 2016, they have banned the search engine Yandex, the platform Kentucky. So in this situation of intense international conflict, they shut off their users from not only the leading Russian media outlets, but also of these platforms. So this is basically the situation at the moment. And I will show you in the next slides a couple of insights from empirical research projects that we did in our team. And one of these projects is is a project on how Yandex mediates information about the coronavirus pandemic. And here you see in this slide, we content analyzed results retrieved in November 2020 for 4 key terms targeting the pandemic, and all queries were posted from Belarus. So not from Russia, but from Belarus. And we see how Yandex can affect not only results that are retrieved from inside Russia, but also from Belarus as a foreign country. And so in this context, Yandex acts as a tool to mediate foreign influence. And as we found, when accessed from the Belarus territory, Yandex retrieves more undebunked conspiracy theories than Google. And secondly, if you look into what conspiracy theories are transmitted into the narratives, then we see that Yandex retrieves much more conspiracy narratives that blame blotters from the US. I don't know if you can see it, but these are theories that blame blotters from China, so that basically the coronavirus escaped from the Wuhan lab, and these dotted bars are the conspiracy that suspect the US military to be involved. And if you see Yandex, if you search on Yandex for conspiracy theories, then you find only the US being blamed. So this illustrates how search algorithms can transmit ideology to foreign target audiences. And another thing that I want to show you briefly is another study how Facebook mediates contents of Russia's domestic media to foreign audiences, because now we ended up somewhat in the paradoxical situation that Facebook is banned, or extremist organizations in Russia, but the Russian state channels, they still keep their channels, they keep broadcasting their content on Facebook. And this slide shows the proportion of foreign audiences that these accounts have. And you see the leading Russian television channels, typical Russia 1, Первый Канал, the first channel. And you see that all these channels have almost 80% of the audience abroad. So what this in essence means is that Facebook is presently primarily acting as a tool for Russia state channels to communicate with their audiences primarily in the post-Soviet region. But of course also in Western Europe, because in Germany, for example, we have a Russian-speaking audience of 3 million, and some of them also focus or consume Russian news through Facebook on this platform. So these are just 2 thoughts on how platform architectures and ecologies can affect the way news flow across borders. And with that, I would like to close my input statement and look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Many thanks, Florian. Our next speaker is going to be Christoph Neuberger of the Weizenbaum Institute for the Network Society. And as before, I'm going to quickly fire up your presentation and then hand you the microphone. You can have that thing. My computer isn't all that fast today. No. So. No. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Take it away.
So, hello everybody. Thank you for the invitation to this very interesting panel. The focus of my opening statement is not a special country, but the state of comparative media systems research in general. But it is inspired by a project of yes. It is inspired by the Media for Peace project, M4P, about two non-Western countries, Lebanon and Afghanistan, on which many colleagues from Munich and Berlin are working at the moment. Sonia is here, Sonia Kretschmer, who is the PI of this project. But we are now in a very early stage of the project, so we cannot present empirical results. Now we are currently conducting interviews in these two countries. It is often mentioned that digitalization is a blind spot in comparative media systems research. There are a few exceptions, but I think this assertion is still valid. Therefore, the question is still, how can we integrate the digital change into the media systems research and especially platforms? So that's our question today. How do we have to realize the concept of failure and machining? There's absolutely no doubt today that platforms are an important part of media systems. Platforms are a game changer in the current transformation of media systems. We can define them as infrastructures which can be openly used by participation, interaction, and observation. On platforms, marketplaces can be established, but also public spaces. Platforms have, like media, the role of as intermediaries. Technical and institutional affordances define and govern how a platform can be designed and used by actors. I emphasize the importance of societal factor, the context as shaping forces for the appropriation and also for both the detrimental but also for the beneficial effects of platforms to avoid technological determinism. Platforms call for a further development of media systems research. Especially 6 revisions are necessary, but which I will choose now in brief. My first point is public sphere, not media as object of analysis. The understanding of media systems in the traditional research is very narrow. It is limited to mass media organizations, especially newspapers and the profession of journalism. And that is not the contemporary situation now in our media system. The object of analysis are media and their roles as news producers, gatekeepers, and commentators. It is not the public sphere as a whole, which is in the focus of media systems research. So I follow your suggestion, Florian, to have change this object of research. Platforms enable much broader participation and the disintermediation, which opened the public sphere for other actors besides professional journalists, like political actors of different types. Platforms allow a great variety of extra constellations besides the one-way communication of mass media. It follows that we should switch from media to public sphere as the object of analysis, because mass media lost their central role as gatekeepers. Now, my second point, beyond the nation as unit of analysis, that's an old criticism of media systems research, but platforms foster the transgression of national borders and the transnationalization of public sphere. The big platforms act globally But a few exceptions, for example, in Russia, where clones of these US platforms can be found but in many other countries, also in Afghanistan and Lebanon, dominates Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram or WhatsApp. In cases like Afghanistan, diaspora journalism is gaining importance, which directs news and comments via social media from abroad to a domestic audience. My third point is not one-sided, but mutual relationships between systems. Originally, only one direction of impact is considered in media systems research. How is the media system influenced by the political system? We should revert the question and also ask, how does the media system influence the political system? That is the perspective of mediatization research, and we combine both directions, I think. Especially platforms have, for better or worse, an enormous influence on the political system. Therefore, we should look not only in one but both directions and at the interdependencies between these systems. But it's even hard to distinguish between the line between politics and media. If you look at platforms, platforms allow all types of political actors to communicate directly with their stakeholders. Media ownership or influencing journalism are losing significance because mass media can be bypassed, while platform parties, for example, or partisan alternative media rise, as we know. This also argues for analyzing publics rather than media only. Then my fourth point, besides the political system, media systems research ignores mostly other subsystems besides the political system and also besides the political public sphere. And the functional differentiated society, other subsystems like economics, like religion and arts and the life world also do influence public sphere, as we also can see in our countries in Afghanistan and Lebanon. It's not only politics, but also other parts of society which are important for media system. And platforms foster the public representation of all these parts of society and also especially of life world. Then my fifth point, conflict and crisis, is characteristics of media systems. Media systems are no stable and homogeneous entities. There are internal divisions with conflict lines and different identities. Take the Lebanese media system as an example. The country is characterized by a great variety of religious, sectarian, and political groups, and a high degree of political parallelism. Sarah El-Rishani writes, cite now, the media reflect the political and social architecture of Lebanon. Most religious and political groups are represented on some level of the media system in form of another. Selvig and Olgit call this an instrumentalized political parallelism. Political clientelism which instrumentalized sizes media outlets. And there are a lot of studies now already about Lebanon, for example, from the Maharat Foundation, which show that alternative media platforms in Lebanon supplement missing topics like corruption, for example, or protests, and also positions which cannot be found in the other media and in public discourse and empower the voiceless. So there's a clear function of these platforms, for example, for Daya and Megaphone, which are independent platforms, what means they are not linked to parties or officials in the country. So let me then come to my last and sixth point, evaluating and designing of platforms. My final point is that the evaluation and designing of platforms and their role in the context of the media system, we should not be satisfied with the existing platforms, as we know, like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but should create platform architectures that are suitable to meet democratic expectations. I just mentioned the vision of an European media platform, which is debated now for several years and shall fulfill whatever this is exactly European values. And also it's the plan in our project, in our Media for Peace project, to develop a new platform for conflict solution and peacekeeping or peace building, a digital platform for online journalism. now I'll stop at this point, and we can debate all these points afterwards in the discussion. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Anna Litvinenko from the Freie Universität of Berlin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for my colleagues for raising a lot of very interesting points. And I try to address already some of them in my talk. And I think I find it's really important, like this solution-oriented thinking. Also, how can our research inform a better platform governance, for instance, internationally? And I think we spot that especially global platforms do have this dual role as being like global platform, but also part of national, like becoming part of national media systems. I will start with making some remarks, like observations from my previous research on discourse architectures, and then expressing some thoughts on the concept of discourse architectures. What should we maybe include in this while researching that? Actually, I started my research on this topic with Florent Höpfl back several years ago, when they did a large comparison of discourse architectures of news websites and commenting sections across 15 countries in the post-Soviet space. And there we found we developed kind of an index of control transfer like the power of influencing discussion in comment sections from media professionals to users. Yeah, like media professionals, for instance, they can censor, maybe ban the debates, or do they have like preliminary moderation, etc. And or the users, which, for instance, rank, like, whatever, so they can shape also the discourse. So, and the second research that we did and was published last year, that was comparing three countries, like three contexts, also post-Soviet, Azerbaijan, Belarus, and Turkmenistan, and across 7 platforms, the discussions, the commenting sections, commenting on news, and where we saw that there was systematical difference and how much criticism was tolerated in different countries in commenting sections. What I observed during this research, that was not focused for research, but it was so evident for me that in the same countries, like for instance Azerbaijan or Belarus, quite restrictive environments, you had still quite different patterns of, like, obviously we did research it, but it popped into my eye after like reading thousands and thousands of comments that for instance, I don't know, in Azerbaijan, you could find some critical, interesting discussions on Instagram or YouTube and not on Facebook. So I decided to look into it, and I did gathered a data set from Russia, taking the most popular news websites, RBK, and comparing the discussions in comments under the same news pieces across 7 platforms. And Russia, in that sense, is a very interesting case, because it has, like as Florian showed, it had previously really like a range, and even like, for instance, also Yandex said, like, you know, like even more platforms that are both based in Russia and global. And then I also called it these arenas, like being more open to users, so to say, or to intervention of media professionals or users. And what I found out, like it is still these are still preliminary results, but there is this tendency that in environments where a media professional, and how I looked at these discussions, is first the deliberative quality of the discussions, like incivility or reciprocity, and the level of criticism. What I found out that in environments where media professionals intervene more, and you have actually more civil discussions, so to say, but less criticism. And at the same time, if you have, like for instance, a Telegram, on YouTube, like where I have, for instance, also more anonymity, then you have more instability, for instance, in the discussion, but at the same time also more like high level of criticism. So I think it is important to think about what our also efforts on the global level on regulation of platforms in, for instance, combating instability and hate speech could bring into this repressive, like constrained environments that, because it simultaneously could lead to subduing and curbing dissent. Although at the same time, what the previous research, like also the previous research on Facebook and Kontakte, did also Svetlana, showed that, of course, what Ting Luo just also said about these political qualities of platforms. Of course, it is not just, and what Florian was saying, like who owns the platform. Of course, it's actually, there come to this also to these considerations, what we should do maybe further in exploring discourse architectures, because discourse is also about like who owns the platform, for instance. Yeah, like how, and also what several studies has shown in Russia, the different, like this kind of bubble created, discussions created in Facebook and Kontakte, also during protests, that you have a kind of this liberal intellectual bubble in Facebook, and Kontakte is more like, you know, pro-state, although also there are some critical debates, but still it's like it was less used also for protest mobilization, for instance. So this, of course, is also perceived kind of image of these platforms. Also, I didn't research that, but that should be a factor why, beyond the whole features and affordances, the fact of how people do use these affordances on these platforms. Of course, so that's not, of course, all about like how you design the platform, but of course about like all the other factors that influence discourse. But nevertheless, I think we should really look further into what Christoph just said about how we could maybe design a better like platforms or government platforms which could be more conducive to more open political debates, civil and open political debates. I think it's quite important question for us. So yeah, I'm glad that we have this discussion and happy to discuss it with you further. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anna. And our final speaker is Svetlana Bodrunova of St. Petersburg State University.
Hi, dear colleagues. Hello, and hi, team. Yeah, I'll try to be quick, and I have to share just several thoughts with you on public roles of platforms, which might be judged very differently in different contexts. Because when we look at discourse architectures, we definitely need to contextualize what we're looking at, and this is sort of my topic of which I have picked up for this panel, and I'm grateful for this invitation. So starting from like technological, sociological, or social determinism, right? You know, so when we assess the public roles of platforms, it looks like they both need to be sort of taken into consideration and taken into at least some balance, not to fall into one or the other. And this is where my thoughts started when I was in 2018 and later exploring what context meant for the studies of public discussions and online discussions and possible public liberation online. I have come to a thought that actually there were three types of context that we definitely need to assess in practically any research of online discussions. One is technological, and platform affordances might be seen as a technological context for what is going on, for the deliberative patterns and discourse architectures that emerge from discussions. Then it's a wider social context, which matters a lot. And simultaneously, it plays several roles. One is providing the premises and social groups that will be on the platform, because platform representation is one of the things that I'm going to touch a bit later. And at the same time, it provides the setting, sort of the ground setting, the fundamental setting against which the public role of platforms is actually judged and assessed. So it sort of plays back and forth all the time. Then the third point is something that Professor Norberger just mentioned, that sort of media are more dissented, but our research says that actually representation of the existing media system on the platform might play a big role, because if we consider discontinued publics that emerged and disappear, our research shows that actually it's media, traditional media represented on platforms, that they are the only actors that actually remain within such discussions. So to me, this is also the media system itself. The audio media system may play a role of a context for a particular discussion online, a particular discussion on a platform, and it really reshapes of what platform has done in democratic terms for a protest movement or within some other context. It actually reshapes what role this particular platform at this particular discussion has played within the context. So I will be not speaking today about the role of media beyond this, but I think that I need to focus on first platform affordances, which we clearly understand how they might work. However, platform affordances of the same platform may work very differently in different political settings in different times and so on. So the two factors are more or less independent. We may treat them as independent variables, like platform affordances that the platforms are offering to discussants, and the social context from which group representation emerges, so to say. And the two dependent things that I really am focusing on in my research is group representation, which groups are there and which groups are not represented, because there's meaningful lacunas matter really. We've seen it like 10 years ago already in the discussions in Russian Twitter, for example, in French Twitter, on Charlie Hebdo, and so on and so forth, how non-presence of different groups matters for future assessment of whether the platform could perform any democratic roles, solution roles, and whatever, and how exactly platform affordances shape the patterns of opinion accumulation. Because what we have seen in our research is that a lot of opinion formation that goes on the platforms actually does not go in traditional deliberative ways, like round-robin discussion where everyone talks and so on. So gradually, I've come to an idea of cumulative patterns in deliberation, of like including spiral of silence, echo chambers, filter bubbles, and so on. So how discussions emerge, dissipated publics, effective publics. So this all has something to do with accumulation of this. So in the interplay of these four factors, two more or less independent, which is platform affordances and social context, and dependent variables, so to say, group representation, who's represented, who's not, and how exactly the accumulation of opinion appears to happen. Within these four factors, you can actually distinguish the different public roles of platform within different settings. And my example would be the Telegram platform, which is still available, I would say, and we are not using it via VPN, unlike Facebook. We're still using it via VPN. There's, the strictness of rules is always compensated by non-obedient behavior. So, Telegram channels and Telegram as a platform very recently has played very different roles, both democratic and democratically questionable, we would say, in different settings in Russia and Belarus, for example, in the Belarusian protests and Russian protests, and in Russia as a political source, as a source of political information. So in Belarus, for example, while in the Western context, Telegram is mostly researched upon as a digital threat because it gives home to terrorism, some encrypted talks, and so on. However, in the much less democratic context, it plays a liberation role due to constellations of these contextual factors and deliberative patterns. So in Belarus, for example, cumulative opinion formation on Telegram has become a circulatory, a capillary system of the Belarusian protests. I was witnessing, I'm Belarusian by origin, I have a lot of relatives there. So I was witnessing the protests like from the very beginning, not participating, but at least like subscribing to many, many channels in my home city, in the city of my origin. And the channels were like one block of flats, one street, one school, one, I don't know, like year at school or whatever. So the capillary role of the platform was very evident, and how people accumulated there, how they got very quickly to the platform, not only to Nexta, which like was like this, counting people for like 84 hours, more or less. However, the very capillary role that it played was very different from how it developed in Russia, for example. And in end, I think the relative success of the whole protest movement somehow depended on this, and the role of Telegram has to be sort of, when we assess it, we need to take into consideration all the contextual factors and the patterns of how quickly it developed and who was there on the platform. What was the age, what was the level of education, whether there were the gender aspect, and so on, because it was all important at that point. In Russia, however, when Telegram appeared, it has not yet played such a big role, and this explains a relative less, sort of fewer success of this platform in terms of not change, but at least fostering some, some political protests. However, in Russia, Telegram has played an interesting role, which Anna actually and our other colleague Anna Smolerova were researching upon, which is very interesting, because in the climate of unreliable political information, at some point, Telegram channels, anonymous Telegram channels, have become sources of huge attraction of the audiences, despite this information was anonymous, non-checked, and there was a whole like growth and then rapid decline of such channels because the cognitive overload of double checking was too big. So this interplay of who was there, how it accumulated, how much time it took, and the social context around it actually shows how different the roles might be and how we can assess this. So I suggest these factors to be taken into consideration, along with many other factors, but these from our research stick out as important for differentiating particular roles in particular cases, which then might be used for comparative research, I hope. Thank you so much.
All right, so we're moving towards the interactive part of this session, which means that I'll just hand the mic to everybody who would like to join the conversation, so also the people on Zoom can hear us. Would like to make a start. Maybe, I don't know, that might be useful if you come out here. Who would like to make a start?
Yeah, if you have any question in the comments, please let me know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We have the first.
Thank you very much.
Maybe quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thank you very much. My name is Sophie Australia. Also Russia, social media and everything that you were talking about. My question is to Svetlana. I'm also studying at the moment social media policies and how they give prominence to Russian public opinion leaders across different platforms. So I was thinking, you haven't mentioned platform policies, and during the moment, especially during the Ukrainian crisis, a lot of things that platforms do. When we talk about democratic potential, for example, or how they platform ordinances keep Russian protesters around, or a lot of possibilities for maintaining the movement and following the information, but at the same time, some platform policies, for example, now they do the opposite. So it's kind of double-edged sword. So I was thinking, if you looked at platform policies, or do you consider them as also one of the factors that might influence this architecture?
Yeah, definitely. Somehow I consider the platform context, so to say, how platforms operate. Probably for me, platform policies, maybe I'm wrong with this, but they're sort of also part of the affordances. I mean, what platforms allow people to do and what not. And they might be technical affordances, it might be policy affordances, and also I think, interestingly, there might be something like cultural affordances. I mean, different use of different cultures of use, different habits of use of platforms, the same technical things, sort of superimposed by societies or by groups historically. This does not directly depend on the platforms, but there's constant interaction between the habits and what platforms actually trying to do nationally, because they will have different national policies towards different countries and different cultures. They're more and more diversifying, it looks like. However, they make generalized decisions as well. So contextual factors relating to platform are definitely like, it's such a huge contested area today. I just, in the morning, one of the students was defending the paper, the whole global project about adaptation of platforms to the EU regulation. So it looks like there are many levels of interplays. I just feel that technical affordances might be the same, and even platform policies might be the same, if they are not restructured by platforms themselves. And this aspect might even come as more important there, because platforms adapt nationally, or at least they try, and cultures that join it might be that context that we need to look at. Yes, I definitely agree.
Just a few words on platform policies, especially in this war right now. We saw the behavior of like what Facebook did, or like what YouTube, for instance. I think it's very important actually to highlight the decisions and what consequences they have for the internal, also for media freedom actually in the countries, or like for independent media in the countries like Russia. So we saw, for instance, YouTube with very kind of controversial behavior also before the war, where they they banned, for instance, Russia Today in some countries, like for instance in Europe and Germany, but at the same time they also deleted or banned Navalny accounts of smart voting in Russia. So you see that they do make deals with governments, and doesn't depend whether it's democratic or authoritarian. So we have to also question it. At the same time, after the war, like, and the introduction of sanctions, what's actually the consequence of the sanctions? Well, like beyond the like the whole, like all tech platforms, not only YouTube or Facebook, that they kind of trying to, like, or aiming at destroying, or like destroying digital infrastructure in Russia. They also destroyed infrastructure for the last remaining idols of press freedom. That for instance, independent Russian journalists cannot monetize their content, and that was the only source of income they had. on YouTube. So I think you should really like this platform decisions and internet policies have to be better also advised, among others, also by communication scholars, what consequences these policies have.
Thank you, everyone, for the panel. My name is Becky. I'm a faculty at University of Southern California, excuse me, in the business school. And I was just curious, this is probably for the first of board's presenters, but anyone can answer. When you were speaking about the Russian platforms and how they banned, obviously, a lot of the big American ones, what percentage of people still get access through VPN or through other ways? And is it a certain segment of the population, and does it create sort of a split in terms of opinions and things like that because they have different kinds of access to information?
I think it's difficult to establish how many people still get access, because you cannot do any type of credible survey in Russian. But of the invasion, we have seen an immense amount of downloads and the other thing is that, as you see, Facebook, I mean, it was always used from abroad. So I don't know if the news use on Facebook is so massive in Russia. And the next thing is that what is interesting is that YouTube is still present. So to get critical information, you don't actually need so much messages. You can go to YouTube or to Telegram. Basically, a lot of information is very long time.
I could add, because Anne and Matt have been researching upon several stages of exodus from one platform to the other in Russia. So there have been like from live to Facebook, and people were migrating. And in terms of the social structure of the platforms in Russia, I may correct me if I sort of wrong, misleading. But for example, Facebook versus Kentucky has been 1 to 10 in terms of population. Populating these platforms, it's always more or less been like this. Facebook was, and we've always considered this sort of a liberal echo chamber, native platform wide, and we wrote about it like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. So these platforms, to my viewpoint, as a user, Facebook has been a bit, depopulated since it happened, at least partially. I see it. I don't know. We have no statistics as so far whatsoever. However, we are seeing the movement. Both businesses are moving from small businesses, tiny businesses are moving from Instagram to a special sub-platform developed by Kentucky. And Facebook is moving more or less to Telegram, but the convergence rate is very low. It's like 1 to 7, that's 7 to 1 so far. So we, many people like me, I think, have felt some destruction of the previously established networks that we have. And of course, in international terms, not only scholars, but a lot of people who just work on Facebook in our echo chamber, and we maintain international connections via this. And for example, my Indian colleagues do not use Telegram. So I'm practically a public, and this is not about only scholars, but just
Matt, can I add to this? Yeah, I think to this, like the availability of alternative for like these free spaces still. And there I also see interestingly that, for instance, Telegram, although like a lot of people migrated to Telegram, affordances of Telegram do not really allow to have this kind of powerful voice as, for instance, like, or like even Facebook. For instance, Telegram, you have to really specifically know where to go to find like to subscribe to these channels, and then at some point you don't have any limit. Like it's not like you cannot really follow like 10 or even like, I mean, people that follow dozens of these channels, but you don't really look like, I mean, I do not read them, because on Facebook you just read, it's very, yeah, it's like really pre-selected news feed, and there you just have to open it and read. It's like really so inconvenient.
It's like very chaotic because you cannot form a feed.
Yeah, it's not a feed, you just have to really select, okay, I follow these or this guy, and then at some point you have to really focus on like just 3 or 4. And what we had now, like this media in exile, for instance, many media have been closed, and it is like you had like, for instance, one channel, Echo Moscow. Now you have like dozens of small channels of journalists who are working just as individual persons for Telegram and YouTube channels. What we have, and that's what Svetlana said, like about this maybe capillary system, and the question is whether this capillary system, like where you have small, very tiny, small, like interestingly, like there was a big TV channel called Rain, and now they call the journalists who are like have this channel's Raindrops. So
That's the metaphor.
yeah, the thing is, can you substitute a rain, like a shower, for this little raindrops, So this is like, although there's so many of them, these channels, there are a little bit like hundreds now, but they cannot, I think, make it up for the loss of big infrastructures of these big media that had channels.
Yeah. To this, I would add that it varies for different functions. When you get a facilitational role, then this capillary thing might actually work quite rapidly and quite sort of helpful in terms of connected action, in terms of facilitational things like where we meet, where we go, and so on. However, there's the ruining of the common reference field is definitely there. We all feel it.
Hi, my name is Azadeh, and I'm a PhD student from University of Vienna. And I'm looking at how far-right communication differs on different platforms. So my supervisor nudged me into look into affordances or technology affordances. And then I stumbled upon, that is very, there's no clear definition. Everyone uses this word currently, but differently. And then they are like, oh, our findings are totally in line with what we expect of the affordances of the platform. And I'm like, but what is that? And there's a clear definition of that. And what is in there, what is out there? Is it searchability? Is it anonymity or identifiability and so on? And I'd like to hear your stand on that.
Expectations. Would like to take this, Fabian?
Yeah, I think that affordance is a little bit difficult, but I think there is a established definition in the sense of it's a thing that makes certain type of interactions more difficult, others more easy. So I think it's a good approach. But in terms of specific agreements like such a there is no, because platforms are different. What occurred to me during this debate is that one thing that is not captured by the affordance is actually the algorithm. Because one thing is the affordance, you type in a comment or something, and then what does the platform do? And how does it output? How does it distribute your comment to each other? This is actually something. And I think the affordance is not different something that you would look at the problem might be.
Yes, I think you're right. It's not a very clear concept. This affordance is a concept. As you mentioned, the general definition is that it opens or closes options for action. But that can be many different things. Also algorithms, I would say, not only stable circumstances of action. That means that to find a clear definition for that. So when a pitch operates for everything which could be influence your actions.
Yeah, I kind of put algorithms in scalability affordance, so that was kind of clear to me. But then the question, for example, with cultural, like technology affordance does not catch the cultural part of who uses social media in what way. And then the next thing is like, how do we research affordances, because for some affordances kind of don't get data, and I did a literature search on far right and tried to put that in different affordances, like how they act on different platforms. And for some affordances that I thought were like super nice, I just realized there's nothing out there.
I just wanted to recommend you the paper by Ting Lo, and just recommended in the sense like Ting Lo and Stockman, and I think it's very interesting how they approach to like this difference between Weibo and WeChat, and even like this method for WeChat as a living room, and Weibo is like more as a guide park, etc. So but of course there are a lot of other challenges in that.
Yeah, cool, thanks. I haven't looked into them yet because it's not the platforms I research currently.
Hello, my name is Christian Nürnberg from Trier University. Yeah, I got the impression from this panel that those platforms are more like a double-edged sword for also the Russian government, because if you think in terms of Telegram, it's now in Dubai, located in Dubai, so it's not clearly associated with the United States, like the platforms you mentioned. And Telegram, I think in this societal context, is also important to reach pro-Russian groups in Western states. So maybe you can't harness or constrain this platform too much in the Russian context, because it's needed to reach the pro-Russian groups maybe in the other systems as well. And does it play also a role? Do you observe some sort of state-coordinated behavior? So are these platforms like Telegram, which are more ambivalent, precious to the Russian state? I don't know, because the owner is now living in Dubai, but she has a Russian background. So I would like to see your thoughts on that. Maybe you're the expert from Russia in this context. Yeah,
what's going on in this platform, right? Like, wow, I can understand it, and I think that definitely will add what I missed. The point is the elites very much live in this platform themselves, because this anonymous talk, and I think this time of this anonymous talk has been very, very useful for Kremlin-oriented channels too, in order to like get inside information out, in order to shape and spin, because this was practically political spinning, quite openly made public. And till today, they all like they themselves need this platform to exist. They have attempted to ban it. It was technically very unsuccessful and affected other important things like Yandex, for example. So they stopped doing it. There was also a bit of a social protest against this. So they are not touching this platform so far, I think, because they themselves have very complicated relations with, very multifaceted relations with the platform. So it's not that it's for foreign use primarily, or for targeting some audiences abroad. Like via Telegram channels, it's quite hard, I think, to do it, and there are better channels, informal and so on. However, this platform is needed for the internal things as well. So this is why it's too late. It's quite cynical, but
I think it's very important question, and I do agree with Svetlana that is totally used for the benefit of the state. And of course, there come also some risks with it for the state, like what Florian just described also in his papers about this weighting the benefits and risks, and apparently benefits for the state prevail. And they did this even during the ban of Telegram, they did use it. And as Anna pointed out, there's this anonymous channel. So it's really, and there were some investigative reports of journalists that clearly stated that state did infiltrate the whole discussion, did spin the discussion through this anonymous channels that were perceived as being like independent. And this is also the key, actually, the image of these platforms of being, kind of more like secure, which is, I guess, not true. Like there were also some reports on that, but still there is this like widespread. It's also one part of this discourse architecture, I guess, like this image, how it is being perceived as, that is kind of a secure platform for protesters that helps, like, protesters all around the world. And this is why they go there. That's kind of course, if the state misuses that. And as for foreign influence, we do see, for instance, Germany, and there we have a Florian Premick, who is researching communities of Corona skeptics and like right wing, and he definitely sees these connections between also pro-Russian channels and these sources with Russia Today, etc. So that's kind of a network which is also very much infiltrated by pro-Russian, pro-state information. So I think it's a very important question to ask.
Interestingly, that Russian anti-vaccination channels have nothing to do with this. So they have been very separate. They're very, very anti.
We are almost at the end, but Ting just had her finger up. I think we should give you the word for some last comments.
Yeah. Please unmute. I should unmute her.
Okay. That's
okay.
Okay, Ting, please.
No, I don't have much to add. That was a very lovely discussion, but the only thing I want to add is regarding the earlier question talking about affordances. I totally agree with your comment. I mean, there is some difficulty when we first start to study affordances. So when, I'll just give you a very brief story. So when we start to first study, how technological design of social media platform could potentially affect political discussion online, we first start with this interactivity concept. And then we were kind of lost in the sense this interactivity concept was used more often by people in computer science or technology science area, rather than people in communication or political science or social science in general. So then we realized that affordance actually is quite a good concept, because it might give you a better sense or a broader, I think it's a broader framework for you to understand affordances. So affordance, then we realize that affordance can be used, either depends on how you see it. So you see it from the designer's perspective. I think that goes to Norman, how he start to operationalize affordance into study of platform. So then you will be in a better position to understand, affordance, whether it's from the designer's perspective, from the platform's perspective, then you will start discuss the business logic. If you understand affordance from the user's perspective, then you will see how user actually understand the platform. And there might be a mismatch between the design affordance and the user affordance. So I think that was my sort of very basic comment to that question about how to understand this affordance, how to use it in research. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody who has participated in this debate. We are unfortunately at the end of the session. I'm sure there are very many interesting conversations that will still have to follow from it. But since I'm presenting in the next session, I will unfortunately have to run away. So
thank you so much for moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. We'll pick up later. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we tried, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, vielen Dank.
The recording has stopped.